Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Easy 11 Plus live lesson. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. A special welcome today to Saba Suleiman in the comments, who's here for the first time. And hello to Priyanka, who says, so nice to meet you again. It's lovely to see you again here as well. A few other people, Oh Baby A Triple, saying it's their first live lesson. I suppose quite a lot of people have just finished their exams, so we're starting off with some new people who are just preparing for theirs. My tablet's just turned itself off at exactly the wrong moment. Let's log back into this. You know that thing where you have to look into the camera, so it recognises you? Making sure that's you. Of course it's me. And now it wants my pin. Anyway, please subscribe to my channel. Don't forget that these lessons are every Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock. I remembered that. It is 6 o'clock. And remember that, as always, the worksheet for today's lesson is linked in the video description. There's always a free worksheet there so that in advance of the lesson, you can work on the things that we're going to do and then compare your work to the explanations that I give in the video. By the way, if you want to get those worksheets in advance of each lesson, then sign up for the free resources linked in the video description, and that will put you onto the mailing list that sends you the worksheet before each lesson. Right, okay, enough of all that. Let's get started. So today's lesson is all about how to start a story. And this is actually because someone got in touch by email, and asked for me to cover this because it's a really important topic. If you start a story well, then it's really easy to carry on really effectively and do something really good. If you don't start well, it's really difficult to recover from that and write a top grade story. So here is, sorry, you can probably hear the bells in the background. There's a church across the street that just this time every evening goes crazy for about 10 minutes. So you'll be hearing dong, dong, dong for the next while. Anyway, nothing I can do about that. It's the joys of live broadcasting. So we've got two tasks to look at today. The overall question is read the following tasks carefully and write the first 4 to 7 lines of each answer. 4 to 7, it's obviously just a very rough guide to say just begin it, just get going. Think about how to get a really good start underway. And the first task is to write a short story based on the following image. And here in this picture, we've got somebody climbing a fence, and the fence has got razor wire on the top, so it's obviously designed to keep people in or out. And if you look over here, you can see the fence curving back in towards us a bit, so it looks very much as though this person is trying to climb out of this compound. It's very early in the morning, the sun is just coming up. Of course it might be setting, but I'm just going to go with morning to keep things simple. So I think we can imagine that somebody is trying to escape from somewhere. The most obvious place to me is a prison, so I'm going to go with that. Of course, there are lots of other options. It could be someone trying to break into an army base, for example. It doesn't matter how you interpret it, but you need to have a clear interpretation in your mind. Now, I'm talking about how to start a story, but of course, there are an infinite number of ways you could start a story well, but there are a few really common ways that you might start a story badly. Now, when I say badly, I don't really mean badly. All of these things I'm about to suggest are things that you could do in another context. You're writing an exam. You have maybe half an hour to produce a fantastic piece of written work. And that puts certain constraints because you have to respond to the task and show all your skills really well in a limited period of time. And so there are certain things that, bearing that in mind, would be very foolish. If you're writing a story for your own enjoyment, if you're writing a longer story, any of these things might be a good thing to do. But in this context, they are almost always a mistake. Now let's see whether you can spot any of these, whether you can spot your own work in any of these common mistakes. If you had to go at the worksheet before this lesson, did you do any of these things? So the first really common mistake is a who I am introduction. So, for example, my name is Sandra, and I am 44 years old. When I was 3, I'm writing quickly so the handwriting's particularly bad, you get the idea. Now something like this, the marker is going blah-de-blah-de-blah. Okay, when are they going to start responding to the question? Because it seems like they want to set up some enormous great book all about this character, and they're not getting onto the task. There's another problem here. My name is Sandra and I am 44 years old. You could have written that when you were 6. It doesn't show any skill. And when you're in an exam, you want to be showing your skill as a writer from the very first thing that you write. So this is, for those reasons, a bad way to begin. Don't start by giving lots of facts. If a fact is useful and interesting to the reader, if it's important for the development of your story, drop it in when it becomes relevant, but not until then. That's a really good rule to follow. Another one would be something like he always carried, I'm just making these up, I haven't prepared these at all. He always carried an odour of, what might someone smell of, especially if they're a prisoner, an odour of tobacco with him, or an odour of, let's go something less obvious, an odour of mouthwash. Why not? This is someone who's very concerned about their personal hygiene. He always carried an odour of mouthwash. Interesting first sentence. Now here we are showing some skills. We're being descriptive. We're doing something interesting from the very start. He always carried an odour of mouthwash. His brows met in the middle. His brows met above his nose. Where else would they meet, I suppose? But anyway, his brows met above his nose, which was small like a bean. And then you know what they're going to do next. This person writing this, they're going then to say something else about their appearance. Maybe if they're really working the 5 senses, they said something about smell, they said something about appearance, maybe they'll say something about the sound of this character's voice. Now all of this is great. But again, where's this going? This isn't based on the picture. This person isn't showing that they've understood details from what's been given and they're getting into the heart of the action. There's always a sense of da-dee-da-dee-da. When is this ever going to get started? So this is not a bad beginning in its own right, anything but for this task, it isn't really a good way to get going. So that's the sort of appearance, what someone looks like, general introduction to the character opening. Writing about character and being descriptive is really important, but introduce description and character development as you go, as things happen to the character. And the most important thing is that you show personality by showing how your character responds to things. Another classic bad beginning is something like, I yawned at the sound of my alarm clock. I reached over and slammed it to silence. But then I rolled out of bed and reluctantly headed to the cupboard and grabbed a box of cereal. I poured milk onto it, and you get the idea. So many people, and I'm not quite sure why, begin their stories with when the character wakes up in the morning. As though there's some kind of rule that a story has to begin at the beginning of a day. There isn't any such rule. And again, first of all, you're not getting into what's at hand. And secondly, by they've had that time they've had their cereal and they've put the rucksack on, they've gone out the house, or whatever it might be, it's really hard to see how you get into the real meat of the story before you've written about 2 paragraphs. So this is a terrible way to get started with a story. How about this? 2 years ago, the judge, we're back on the prison topic now based on the photo, the judge sent me down, that means sent to prison, sent me down with a glint in his eye, and so on and so forth. Now, this is relevant to someone being in prison, but again, a bit like starting first thing in the morning, you're not writing about the events in the picture, you're writing about something that happened 2 years ago. When are you ever going to get going with the task? I'm also not very keen on with a glint in his eye, because that's a really, really common phrase, and you should avoid those. You should show your own creativity and originality. But that's another classic thing. So going back in time. And the last one, which is less bad than the others in some ways, would be something, I won't write it because I think we want to hurry on to doing something that's good, but looking back at the picture, it will be something like, the sun was edging over the horizon in the east. The sky was just beginning to colour from black to blue. He was there silhouetted against the fence. Its meshwork resolved into diamonds as the morning light spread, and shards of light glinted from the razor, and so on and so on and so on. And it's good, it's relevant, it's okay, it's not great, but there's some decent description in there. But when is it ever going to get starting? It's static, it's standing still. You're not developing anything. So that one isn't so bad. You could make a really good story out of it, but it's a bit of a hesitant start. Don't begin with a paragraph that's just a block of static description. Give your story a little bit of direction, which doesn't mean loads of plot. It just means give it some direction. So the 5 bad openings that I've outlined there. Number 1, a big who I am. My name is Robert. I am 84 years old. I blah, blah, blah. No. Appearance, starting by telling us exactly what the character looks like, what they smell like, what their voice sounds like, and not telling the story. Always beginning with getting out of bed in the morning. Why? Don't do that. Unless the task is to write about getting out of bed in the morning. Even if the task is about going to school, you don't need to describe waking up. You can just start it from the point when you walk out the door, for example. We don't need to know about your cornflakes. Events in the distant past. Just write about the events in front of you. It's a really short story. You've got 20 or 30 minutes, so you've barely got enough time to write well about what's in front of you there. Don't write about other things from other times. And the last thing is, even if you're writing about what's in front of you, don't just describe it as though it's all standing still. Give it some movement. So what we want is something that's focused on the picture, that has a bit of movement, that is descriptive, that doesn't dump loads of facts on us at the beginning, but just gets going with the picture and a little bit of plot direction. Okay. We got a suggestion here from Sharon. My heart beating like a hammer heating a table continuously. I ran as quick as light to the electric gates. Okay, so I like the way that gets right into the task, and I like that it's descriptive. I don't understand the simile. Like a hammer heating a table continuously. Do you mean hitting? Perhaps maybe it's an autocorrect on your phone, perhaps. So let's say it's a hammer hitting a table continuously. I'm not sure what the table is. You could say my heart thumped my rib cage like a hammer against a table. And now the table image makes a bit more sense because we can imagine what the table is representing. So that's almost there, just needs a little bit of a tweak. I ran as quick as light to the electric gates. It's descriptive. I'm not a huge fan of as quick as light, just because it's a really common descriptive phrase that we've all read 1,000 times. Try to be a little bit more original. Right, okay. I'm going to get into my suggestions now. We got 2 of these and loads of junk on the screen, and we don't want to be talking about what not to do forever. But thank you for pouring your suggestions in there. Okay, so I want to begin right in the middle of this picture. We've got a character who scroll. There we are, scrolled. We had a character who at this moment is pulling their way up the fence. So I want to show my descriptive abilities, I want to give it direction, and I want to show that I'm responding to the visual stimulus, which is a pretentious way of saying the picture. So what better way than to begin at the moment of the events in the picture? And I want to be descriptive and develop character, so let's think about what this person is experiencing. If you're pulling yourself up wire like that, it's going to really, really hurt. So what would the wire be like on a fence like this? Let's scroll back up, in fact. Scrolling like a madman, but anyway. Well, it would have some give as your weight pulls on it. I think it's going to sag a bit. You know what? I think in this picture the person is actually just posing in front of the fence and not actually touching it. But let's imagine that they're really climbing it. So it's going to sag a bit, but it's also going to really be hard and really hurt, possibly cutting into your fingers. So let's say that. Oops. The wire. So those first two words demonstrate already that I'm responding directly to what's in front of me. The wire was springy, but hard or sharp against his fingers. I don't know, we could say either, but hard against it. I'm imagining him slightly below the razor wire on top, but hard against his fingers. Okay, so that's a really simple sentence, but I've already given two descriptive ideas, and I've presented a little bit of complexity. So it's springy, and something that's springy you might think it's kind of soft, but here it's hard. It's really bites back even though it's springy. Springy but hard against his fingers, so we're starting to get the character. It's him. Who is he? The reader wonders. You could say my, but sometimes it's interesting just to do something different and not write in the first person. The wire is springy but hard against his fingers. Okay, now let's look back at the picture. What's he doing? You can see him trying to lift a leg and I think get a toe hold in one of those diamond-shaped gaps. So I've had that thought, and now I need to write it down well. So what's he doing with his knees? Is he throwing them up? No, I think he'd be climbing very carefully, even if he wants to get a move on. So he lifted one knee. He lifted each knee slowly. How about he eased one knee up at a time? That's very precise. He eased one knee up at a time. Okay. Then Mash says, can we describe the wire as barbed? Sure. Why not? That's your interpretation. I think it's fairly clear that the lower part of the wire isn't barbed, but the wire at the top, the razor wire, is certainly barbed. You can see the barbs on it. OBABA Triple says, I can read your writing, Robert. That's incredible. It's a miracle. First time anyone's ever said that. He eased one knee up at a time. So we've got ease as an interesting verb. Right. Putting his toes into each hole. Hole, let's be more specific, into each diamond hole, each diamond gap. Putting his toe, what would you do if you're feeling your way? Your eyes are up here and you're trying to get your toe, I'm destroying everything here. You're trying to get your toe into the hole. You'd be kind of poking, maybe dabbing at it with your toes. I like that. So, dabbing, got a bit of hair on the screen. Dabbing his toes into each diamond. You could say hole, but I don't think a hole as being there's something kind of solid around it and then there's a hole. I'd say these gaps in the wire. It feels more precise to me. Into each diamond gap. Okay, so this is very detailed. And it starts to give us a little bit of characterization. We haven't said anything about what this person is like, but we get a sense that they're someone who's very meticulous, very methodical, someone who does one thing at a time carefully, even if they're in a stressful situation. And if we imagine this person escaping from prison, no doubt, it is. Okay. But if you were doing this, if you were climbing this fence, what would you be most worried about? You'd be worried about getting caught. It's quite dark. Why might you be caught? You might be seen or you might be heard. What would the sound be that would get you heard? It would be the sound of the wire going creaking, in other words. And what would you do when you sense that sound? You kind of go and pause for a second. And then carry on, perhaps. I think that's cringing. So I'm working really hard to find the right verb for everything I do. You should watch my video from, I don't know, a few weeks or months back about using verbs effectively in creative writing. That's all about this. He dabbing his toes into each diamond gap, cringing. Yeah, cringing at, I don't know if you hear my chair creaking appropriately, cringing at every creak of the wire. The wire was springy but hard against his fingers. He eased one knee up at a time, dabbing his toes into each diamond gap, cringing at every creak of the wire. Now you'll notice that this second sentence is a little bit longer and it's broken into shorter units slowed down by commas. And so you could even say that the kind of slow, steady pace of this sentence matches the slow, steady pace of his climbing. You could say that. It's certainly the kind of thing you might spot if you were writing a comprehension on this text. So always good to bear these things in mind. Okay, now what else in this picture would be concerning? And we've given a picture of him climbing. We don't want to describe every single step of it because that could get a little dull. I think the sun is of interest. And I think that's a particular concern for him because the sun is likely to help him is likely to make it more likely that he's spotted. So the sun is likely to be a worry. Okay, so you could say the sun was rising. To be honest, I think that's fine. It's simple and clear and direct. But always in an exam, look for an opportunity to say something slightly more interesting sometimes. Which doesn't mean making things overcomplicated, but is there a slightly more interesting way to say that? Well, if the sun's rising, which direction does it rise in? It rises in the east. And how high is the sun? Well, it's sort of hovering just above the horizon. Okay, and there are some hills. So what have we got there? The sun was hovering above the eastern hills. So I've had lots of ideas and I've just put together a simple descriptive sentence that brings them together. Yeah. The sun was hovering above the eastern hills. Okay. And you could stop there. We've done more than 4 lines. But I'm just going to wrap this up as a paragraph because why not? So how does the sun make him feel? Yeah, I think we should do something with this because why does the sun matter? It matters because he might get caught. So dead simple. It was time to hurry. And I think that's good because I've linked ideas. So rather than saying the sun was hovering above the eastern hills and then talking about something else, I've linked it into the next idea so that there's a sense of continuity and of why things matter. So I've got right into the heart of things. I've given hints about character without saying he was methodical in the way he did things, although he understood the importance of urgency. He was terrified of being caught. No, he was cringing at every creak of the wire. I haven't said it was morning. I've said the sun was above the eastern hills, so it must be morning, and so on. So I had a very light touch with giving facts or telling you things about character, but I've painted the scene, I've got action and direction, and I've given hints about who this person is. Let's read through one last time. The wire was springy but hard against his fingers. He eased one knee up at a time, dabbing his toes into each diamond gap, cringing at every creak of the wire. The sun was hovering above the eastern hills. It was time to hurry. Right, now I've just read that out loud to review it, and I've spotted something I'd like to change. Maybe you've already spotted it. I've repeated the word wire, and I think that's unnecessarily clumsy. So we've had the wire was swinging hard against his fingers, cringing at every creak of the metal. Why, how about that? I'm sure you can come up with a better solution, but that way we don't have that slightly clunky repetition of the word wire. Right, the sun was hovering above the eastern hills, it was time to hurry. And I think that's a fairly good opening. Right, I want to push on. Thank you to everybody who's putting their ideas into the comments. I want to push on a bit so we don't get bogged down, so I'm not going to comment on them now. However, if you've got a story opening for either of these stories that you would like to get my feedback on, post it in the main video comments on YouTube after I finish this video, and I'll be delighted to give some quick thoughts on it. Okay, so option 2 here is to be turning over papers. I've got some notes on what I might put down for my ideas, but I've actually changed quite a lot of my initial ideas as I've been doing this video, and I've thought of different things. Right, describe an event in which you travel extremely fast. You can draw on your imagination or your experience or a combination of these. So that's just a way of saying that you can write about your own life, something that happened to you, or you can just make up a story. It doesn't really matter. You just have to do a good bit of writing that responds to the title. So again, we don't want to do any of the bad things. You don't want an introduction saying who you are in lots of detail. We don't want a lengthy description of your character's appearance. We don't want you to start with waking up unless that's actually where the story should start for some reason. For example, the task says describe waking up. We don't want something about things in the distant past, things that happened ages ago, and we don't just want lots of description that doesn't get us into the events of the story. I'm not going to give examples of those here, I've already done that. Let's get on with what we could do here. So, as with the picture option, you could get right into the action, which in this case would mean describing yourself already travelling very fast. That would be a really good opening. So you could say something like, so the wind caught me. Okay, so that already gives a sense of something happening at speed. The wind caught me and carried me along. That's what I wrote in my notes, but actually I think we can come up with a more interesting verb. How about engusted me along? Engusted me along. Yeah, caught me, engusted me along. Supporting me. Okay. So now we get hints that you're not on the ground in a car, but you're actually in the air, supporting me. And let's have a simile. So what might support you through the air? Some kind of angel, maybe. Supporting me like a friendly angel. Okay, so that would be a really good beginning in the middle of things. And you could develop that, and that would show someone who's really followed the lessons from the previous video and is not doing any of the things that you shouldn't do. So that would be one really effective opening. I imagine, I don't know what's happening here. I think maybe this is someone who's flying in a wingsuit or something like that. Who knows? I had a thought, though, of something which I thought was a bit quirky and interesting. So I was coming up with these examples just before the start of this lesson. I'm like that. And I thought, when would I be traveling really fast? I could be in a sports car. I could be skydiving. And then I thought, human cannonball just came into my mind. I thought of a circus. There's people who go into a cannon that's actually spring-loaded, I think, and then they're launched through the air and land in a net. And I thought it'd be really interesting to describe that. And in this case, I thought to really give it atmosphere, rather than beginning when they're already flying, it'd be great to give some of the tension as they're waiting to be launched. But, and this is the crucial thing, the title wants you to describe an event in which you travel extremely fast. So if you want to begin before you travel fast, be very careful. Make sure that you get into the fast movement within the first few lines, really in the first paragraph, so that you're clearly directly responding to the task. So this, I hope, is a good beginning, but it's a dangerous one because it could become a bad opening if you didn't get a move on. Right, so let's see. So this is someone, I'm imagining they're in the cannon, so the circus must be going on around them. What would it be like in one of these cannons? Well, it's probably been in some storage place since the previous day's show. It's going to be metal, so I reckon it's going to be quite cold or cool in there. And what would you be doing? Well, I think that if you were about to have some platform under your feet launching you up, you'd be very, very concerned about your knees getting wrecked. So I would say that rather than standing up stock straight like this, I think you'd have your knees slightly bent to absorb some of the shock. Now, if anyone watching this is from the circus, you might tell me I'm totally wrong, and in fact your legs need to be straight so that you're propelled properly. I don't know. So your expertise would be welcome for next time I'm a human cannonball. Anyway, so what are those two ideas? They're in there, it's cool, it's dark, and they're bending their knees. Now, I know it's a bit stupid me standing on a chair and showing you what bending my knees looks like, but I'm actually trying to teach an important lesson, which is that when you describe something that you haven't yourself done, that isn't from your own memory, you have to be an actor. You have to put yourself into that situation and imagine exactly what it would be like, what you would do, and that's the way that your writing will become realistic. All writers have to be actors, at least in their head. You probably can't stand on your chair in the exam hall, I'll grant you that. So, what would you do as you settled in? I settled into that. I sank into, we said it was cool and dark, into the cool darkness of the cannon. Now, I'm always telling people to use the five senses, which doesn't mean listen, it doesn't mean say a sound, say a sight, give a smell, give a taste, give a touch sensation, a few I remembered them. What it does mean is you should always be looking for interesting angles by picking from some of those senses. And here, we've already got touch with cool and sight with darkness. So we're flying. I sank into the cool darkness of the cannon, okay, flexing my knees. And you know what I said about not giving lots of information? So we didn't start by saying a human cannon is spring-powered and you have to climb into it. But let's hint at some of that information so that the reader can clearly visualize what's going on and get involved in the story. We need some information if we're going to get involved. So flexing my knees towards the springboard. So I'm emphatically not saying that information is bad. I'm saying you should give bits of information as they become relevant when they're going to be important for helping your reader work out what's going on. Flexing my knees towards the springboard. Okay. Right, let's just take a moment to give some more atmosphere. Now, I know I said you shouldn't just statically describe what's happening at the beginning, but we're already not too static because they're doing something, they're flexing their knees. So it's not just a static picture description. And also there's going to be a pause where there's tension before they start, and we can play with that a little bit by just putting a little bit more description in. Let's work those 5 senses. So how about in there, you're in a confined space, it's been in some storeroom. I think smell is a really obvious sense to employ here. It's been in the storeroom, so it's going to be kind of dusty. What's the smell of dust? It's sort of musty is a good word, I think, or reasonably good word. The air was musty. Okay. And what else might it smell of? It'll smell of the last person who was in there. Maybe me, maybe somebody else. And what would they be doing as they waited for this possibly horrendous experience? I reckon they'd be sweating. So the air was musty. You could say, and smelled of sweat, and stank of sweat. What's a really strong word for a bad smell? And this is a good one, a good verb. And reeked of old sweat. Simple. Notice how if I use a really powerful, really interesting, specific verb like reeked, it's quite natural then to use a really simple adjective like old. I don't need to do something complicated there. If you do too many fancy things in a phrase, it just starts to look like you're showing off rather than you're trying to communicate. And communication is often about simplicity, a balance of precision and interest and direct simplicity. I'm going to take a moment out to comment on Sharon's suggestion. I know some people are posting, I know sometimes the accounts are actually your parents' names, so I don't know whether you're really Sharon. But anyway, we waited something like 5 to 10 minutes to go on the runway. Once we were in the air, trees, buildings, nature raced past me, and soon enough the only thing I could see was white fluffy cotton candy. Okay, some lovely ideas, and they're like raced as a verb and so on. I would cut the first bit, because you talk about waiting to go on the runway, and then you skip straight to being in the air, so you obviously aren't very interested in being on the runway. You don't really have anything to say about it. It's a bit like starting a story by saying when you got out of bed. That's what you've done here. So I'd skip the runway. You're much interested in talking about what's in the air, obviously, because that's where you put all your descriptive focus. So just start there. Once we were in the air, that will be a perfect beginning for your story. You do not need to begin on the ground, just as you don't need to begin when you wake up in the morning. Trees, buildings, nature raced past me. Nature doesn't quite work because trees are something from nature. So I would just say trees and buildings raced past me, and soon enough the only thing I could see was white fluffy cotton candy. Well, I like that soon enough the only thing you could see was the clouds. Not so keen on white fluffy cotton candy, because everybody describes clouds as being like candy floss or cotton candy, if you want to give it an American tinge. It's really commonplace. If you've come across a particular description loads of times before, do not use it. Come up with something that is your own. So it's not bad at all. I think it's a great beginning, really good set of ideas, but those are some things that I might change to make it better. Right, back to mine. The air was musty and reeked of old sweat. Okay, let's give us a bit more tension. So what would happen just before you're launched? There'd be some kind of what do they call some showman, ringmaster? I can't remember what the term is anyway for the person who leads the circus. Mental block. Anyway, what would they say? Something like, and now time for the great something or other. Let's go with that. So, and now I'm going to do something I often suggest not doing unnecessarily, putting ... And the reason I'm putting that is to show there's a big pregnant pause there. And now time for that kind of thing. And those ... kind of implies it, I think. Okay, you're going to wonder why I am putting a capital T. You will see the voice boomed. Okay, how would it sound if you're stuck in a cabin? It would sound kind of muffled. Okay, muffled. I like fuzzy as a word. Why not? Fuzzy and distant. In my notes I had oddly distant, but actually it isn't odd. I mean, of course it sounds distant. That's not odd at all if you're stuck in some metal tube. Okay. Now, I could say, and now the voice boomed, fuzzy and distant. So then I'd have a lowercase t to continue my sentence. I've put a capital T to make this beginning of a new sentence. Why? Well, let's hear the difference. So with punctuation, it's always about listening. People, please stop spamming by just posting letters all the time. I don't know what you're doing, but it just clogs up the comments, people. Right, anyway. So let's hear the difference between the two. Let's imagine I carry on the sentence again. And now the voice boomed, fuzzy and distant. Okay, now with the new sentence. And now the voice boomed, fuzzy and distant. So by starting a new sentence, I create a bigger pause after the voice. So I create impression of a big pregnant silence falling across the auditor, across the, what do you call it, across the big, through the big top, if this is a circus. So that capital letter helps to convey that. So punctuation is about little subtle implications. Always think about them. It may not matter that much, but these things come together to create an emotional impression. Fuzzy and oddly distant. Okay, because they stopped, they're probably going to start again. And now for, okay, what should we call this character? The amazing flying, no, let's be alliterative. The fabulous flying, and I reckon their performer name would also start with an F. Why not for alliteration? Let's say they're the fabulous flying Ferdinand. Okay, and now for the fabulous. No, the would be part of the name, surely, if we're talking about this kind of circus act. And now for the fabulous flying. And let's imagine that they are shot out of the cannon before the word is finished. Flying Ferd, and now we need the ... again to show that the word's unfinished, so I've actually used it twice. Don't overuse any form of punctuation, but I think this is okay. And now for the fabulous flying Ferd. Okay, so before your launch, someone's going to do something with the mechanism to launch you. And now for the flying Ferd, I could say, then there was a click, for example. But let's just make this click just seem like something that just comes out of the blue. So rather than then there was, let's just say a click. So grammatically, formally, maybe not absolutely correct, but of course it's correct here because it does what we want. And if it does what you want and communicates that to the reader, then it is by definition correct, whatever the grammar book might say. A click and, okay, and I was shot out of the cannon. Obvious. What would it feel like? You've got your knees bent, you're standing there, and suddenly your feet are exploded up by this plate. Now your knees are bent. Initially, your feet are going to start moving before the rest of your body started moving. So it's as though your feet are being shot up towards the top of your head. And if you're looking up through the gap, maybe your top of the top is kind of your eyes. Well, for me, it's probably my nose because it sticks out so far. But for you, let's say it's your eyes. So a click and my feet, and my feet exploded. My feet didn't explode. You have to carry this on or else it's absurd, as though your feet have been blown apart. And my feet exploded towards my eyes. Okay, and now we're underway. So I said that you have to make sure that you're dealing with exactly what the question wants within the first few lines. So this builds up to travelling extremely fast, but it's always clear that that's what's happening. So I talk about the cannon and the springboard in the first sentence, so there can be no doubt that I am talking about the task that's been said. And then within this paragraph, we're actually underway moving fast. So there's no sense of when are they going to actually answer the question. There's a wide range of senses in here. So what have we got? We've got sight, we've got touch, we've got smell, we've got sound, The only thing we haven't got is taste, really, although taste is sort of another version of smell, and you don't need to get all the senses in, but this is just an indication that this is very descriptive. Let's read through it. I sank into the cool darkness of the cannon, flexing my knees towards the springboard. The air was musty and reeked of old sweat. And now, the voice boomed, fuzzy and distant. And now for the fabulous flying third, a click. And my feet exploded towards my eyes. Okay. I'm quite proud of this. I like this story opening. I think I could enjoy carrying on with this. If anyone wants to carry on and finish this story for me, I will be really pleased to see your version of how you continue this. But anyway, that's by the by. Good. So I think I've said enough about this. Get into the heart of things. Be descriptive, but don't just describe statically the way things are. Don't tell me about your breakfast and when you got out of bed. Don't tell me what happened 2 years ago. Don't tell me your age and your height and what your favourite colour is. Look at the task, get right into it, give it direction, which does not mean a complicated plot. Drop in information and hints about character as you go rather than serving them up to me like a breakfast buffet. You get the idea. Splendid. As I said before, please have a go. Write your versions and post them in the comments. Not the live stream comments because they disappear once I cut the introduction off the video. The live stream comments automatically disappear. That's a YouTube feature. Post them in the video comments on YouTube, and I will have a look at your story openings or your continuations and honour you with my great wisdom. Okay, thank you for all the ideas in the comments. Just copy them, stick them in the main comments, and I'll be delighted to comment on them. Okay, speeding on to the tip of the week this week is be a little bit cautious about who you listen to and what advice you take. As you prepare for something important in your life, which in this case is the 11 plus exam, there will be all manner of people giving you advice, and some of it will be fantastic advice. Some of it will be total nonsense. People will say, you don't need to work on this, it isn't going to come up in the exam. Is that person an expert on the exam? Do they know what the examiners will set? Have they contacted the school and asked? If the answer to these questions is no, then you would take that bit of advice with a pinch of salt. You would certainly not structure your revision around it. Someone says to you, you're not really that good. I'm not sure you should be doing the 11 plus. How many people have had that kind of thing said to them and then have gone on to achieve fantastic things? For whatever reason, they haven't shown their intellectual ability to that person, or that person hasn't been astute enough to notice it. It does not mean that they are not good enough. Maybe you shouldn't do the 11 plus. But it shouldn't be because somebody says you're not good enough. I would listen more carefully to people who are really committed to helping you improve and become better at things, and after being deeply engaged with your work, then say, perhaps this isn't for you, have you considered these other good options? And that person's advice might be worth listening to. Somebody who says, you must go to this school because it's where all our mates are going. Think about what is best for you and for your family. You will make new friends there, and so on. It's a general comment. It could apply to anything. Just be a little bit cautious about listening to advice. Listen to advice carefully. Try and take what's useful and helpful from it. And certainly don't assume that just because advice is negative, suggesting you shouldn't do something, that you should ignore it. But don't just absorb everything like a sponge and assume that everybody knows more than you. Perhaps they don't. And now it's time to take a few of... Right, have any questions turned up so far? There's always a 30-second or so delay between your comments and me seeing them. So no comments quite yet. The clouds blossomed pink, as if in visual empathy with the poppy red paint below. Well, that's fantastic. I think that's absolutely brilliant. You have a decision to make about whether the word visual is necessary in that sentence or whether that information is communicated. But then again, I like the sound and the rhythm of the phrase as if in visual empathy. So for that reason alone, you might choose to leave it in. it's a bit of a toss-up. That's a lovely one. Yeah, I'm sorry to other people whose suggestions I haven't seen. I've been busy giving the lesson. I haven't been constantly reading the comments. Trident Gaming says, how should we approach a comprehension? By looking at the many videos about comprehension in this channel. And I have loads of resources for comprehension. Look in the bookshop on my website, link in the video description. 11 Plus Lifeline will send you squizillions of comprehensions, always with my very detailed solutions and example answers and explanations and so on. So yeah, those sorts of things are how you should approach a comprehension. I won't give tips here simply because I've given loads of tips in those places, including completely for free in my other videos. Look at the Easy 11 Plus channel on YouTube and they'll be there. I'm not going to comment on any more suggested creative writing answers. We're moving on to the general questions. Someone else wants to know what the S in RSL means. It stands for stupendous because my videos are stupendous. Robert Stupendous Lomax. Are you making merch? Yes, when I've got round to designing. I'm thinking about some pens and pencil cases to start with, which I'll be dishing out to people who make really good contributions in these lessons. When is your next live lesson? Next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Go on, people. Let's have some more interesting questions. Someone's surely thinking, why have you got a red patch under your eye here? Because I was removing a stuck drawer from the inside of the door of my fridge. And I pushed at it and I pushed at it, and then it went bang and slapped me in the face and cut my lower eyelid. That's the answer to that question that nobody has yet asked before somebody does. What is the best way to prepare just 1 week before the exam? Thank you, very politely says Catherine. Well, certainly not panicking and certainly not working every hour of the day because it won't help you. You'll just get worn out. Have a clear sense of what the things are that you still need to work on, your weaknesses, and do some work on those. But also keep working steadily at the things you're good at so that you're in a really good rhythm with those and you can get those marks well when the exam comes. You should be doing a certain amount of timed practice, so you're used to working quickly, but also do some slower practice so that you're still thinking about your core skills. Do some revision on lists of spellings you keep getting wrong, your times tables, some basic maths things, like just check that you still know how to divide fractions, that you can still do long multiplication and division, that sort of thing. You haven't forgotten these things. Strawberry Cloud says, I like your shirt. I find it hard to believe. I just wear these very simple single-coloured t-shirts for these lessons. It's become kind of the brand by accident. I'm not sure how much there is to like about it, though, but thank you. Yeah, that kind of thing as you come in and prepare for the exams. You'll know what works for you, so keep doing it. That's actually one of the most important things to bear in mind. Are we allowed to watch other people's videos? No, yeah, of course. Obviously. There's some great videos out there. I keep sharing videos from Lesson Aid, for example, in my Facebook group, who's someone about your age who does videos for the 11 Plus. There are lots of people like that who do great stuff. Too many to name. Absolutely, watch loads of things. Of course, sometimes they will give different advice, but sometimes I will contradict somebody else or they will contradict me. And then you have to use your brain and think about which bit of advice is most useful for you. Are you allowed a protractor? Almost certainly. But the key thing is, if this is an exam where you're going to need a protractor, you'll be allowed to use it. I can't see anyone taking it out of your pencil case. Yes, take a protractor. It's an important bit of exam kit. Yes. Yeah, I can't believe that would ever not be allowed. What is your number and what's your name? Beg your pardon. My number is 544 and my name is Edward. I'm not sure. It sounds like I'm a captured soldier or something. Name and number. Are you allowed dictionaries? No, absolutely not. That would really defeat the point. Is it better to write in the first person or the third person? Well, if the question might say, so it might say something like, you are in a blah, 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 then you know it's got to be in the first person because it's talking about you, which means me, if you see what I mean. If you aren't given a hint, then it's completely up to you. Just one very important thing to bear in mind that a lot of people get hung up on. If you write in the first person, so you write a story which is, I did this, then you can only write about things that the character would know. And it gets confusing if you include things they only found out later. So it's really best to only write about things that they knew at the time. So if you say, I was walking down the corridor listening for sounds, at the same time, my friend George was eating his breakfast. How would you know that? Because you're not some omniscient narrator. That means a narrator who knows everything. You're me, you're a character in the story, and you only know the things that you could see or hear or whatever. So just bear that in mind if you write in the first person. But either is great, and you should practice doing both. Is there a certain way our posture should be in interviews for the exams? Well, the first thing is don't worry about it too much. At the end of the day, they shouldn't be judging you based on your posture. But broadly speaking, if you're kind of hunched up like this and you kind of slouched like I tend to be because I have a poor posture, if you're sort of closed like this and you got your legs kind of crossed or spread wide or something, it's going to be a bit nervous and awkward, and you won't project sort of confidence in what you're saying. So a good way to sit is feet a little bit apart, flat on the floor, not jiggling around, and your hands, like your arms not crossed. And probably the most important thing is look the person you're talking to in the eye and smile occasionally. But just don't stress about it too much. What really matters is that you come there wanting to communicate, but also wanting to listen. And particularly that you develop your ideas and give examples. I think the most important bit of advice that I would give to people for interviews is give examples for the things you say. So don't just say yes, or don't say, I like the sports facilities here. Say, I like the sports facilities here, particularly the tennis courts, because I've never had a chance to play on a grass court before. And it would be really interesting to see how it's different from what I've been used to playing on asphalt at my local tennis club. And suddenly you've given a great answer just because you've given an example, which you've given an example of what you like about the sports facility, which is the tennis courts. Same thing applies talking about a book. Don't say, I like Harry Potter because it's exciting. Say, I like Harry Potter because it's exciting, particularly when this thing happens, which is exciting because X, Y, and Z. And then even though you're talking about Harry Potter like everybody else, you've said something really good. So give examples. That's my most important bit of interview advice. Can I take you as a hostage? Only if you can catch me. Right. I am going to call it a day there because it's been almost an hour, and I think that's enough for anybody, particularly me. It's been wonderful to have you here. Please subscribe to my channel, check out the links in the video description, sign up for the free resources down there, and of course buy all my stuff, obviously. You don't need to, but wonderful if you do. Main thing, sign up for the free resources, subscribe to the channel, and come back here next Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock for my next Easy 11 Plus live lesson, and bring your friends. Bye-bye.